Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. I hope you had a great day. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories, where people conform to the letter but not the spirit of a request. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and for hitting the like button. Today we have 4 great stories. If you enjoy them, please subscribe and hit the like button. And now let's begin, shall we? The first story is called You Are Not Going Above and Beyond. Many years ago I got a job working in a retail store. This store and 2 others were owned by a young couple and another young woman. I worked there happily for about a year and became very good at my job, which included reminding the owners when stock needed replacing, merchandising, etc. At one point we lost a few staff in rapid succession, leaving myself and my friend as the only long-term staff. Then my friend was offered a managerial position with one of our competitors, so she left as well. This left me to train all the new staff, run the floor, deal with vendors, place orders, do pricing, basically manage the store. So I approached the owners about being named the new manager, since I was already doing the job, just without the pay or title for several months. They said that sounds great, but we'd like you to do a management course before we make it official. But before you do that, can you just wait a couple more months until all the new staff has been trained? I naively agreed to do this, thinking long term it would be to my benefit. Now, during the waiting time, one of the new staff got very chummy with the owners. She had never worked retail before, wasn't particularly good at the job, but was super friendly to them. Next thing I know, they have appointed her the new manager. Needless to say, I didn't take this news particularly well, especially considering she was still constantly asking me how to do things. Let's just say my attitude towards work changed drastically. I just didn't give a flip anymore. Stock was getting low? Not my job. Next week's roster hasn't been done? Not my job. I still performed all the tasks I was paid to do, and all my customers loved me, but I stopped doing any extra work. So then I get dragged into the owner's office for a meeting. We have noticed that your attitude has changed. You are not going above and beyond. Blah blah. So we would like to give you the next 2 days off to think about why you want to continue to work here, and we would like it in writing. Before I had even walked out, I knew I was going to be resigning. I went home, talked to my husband, and he agreed I should just quit. So I took my 2 paid days off to spend time with my family and get a new job. When I went back into work, I was greeted with smiles and they eagerly took the piece of paper I handed them. The look on their faces dropped to shock when they realized what they were reading was my resignation and not an account of how much I loved working there and all the reasons I wanted to stay. I worked my 2 weeks notice and happily left to greener pastures at my new job. Less than a year later, their store closed down, so I guess their choice of manager didn't go so well. The next story is called You Can't Get Overtime. After becoming burned out being a tech guy, I had an opportunity to work in a special program in a completely unrelated field, but one that made use of my secondary set of skills. I joined as a member of the department, and through a series of hilariously cringy actions by the head of the department, I ended up being assistant to the director who replaced the director that hired me. He and I got along swimmingly, and we rebuilt the entire department to not be a money pit like it was before. Our time clock is web-based, but our internet connection is iffy at the best of times. Sometimes punches go missing or don't even get recorded. I asked for permission to have access to edit punches, so the main office that took forever to make edits didn't have to deal with it. This was granted, and things shaped up even more. As assistant director, I had a guaranteed 40 each week, but was hourly and not salary. Because of the frenetic pace of what I do, punching the clock can be tricky as I do lots of work before and after the scheduled time. I do not mind this because my days are pretty easy in general, and my boss and I are very casual in interaction. He trusts me, and I wouldn't dare betray that trust. My erratic clock punches began to accrue overtime, and the CFO caught wind of this and gently told me that I cannot get overtime unless it's an emergency or crunch busy in our industry. After talking with my boss, we decided to allow me to edit my times to get a straight 40 to appease the CFO. 3 years pass and I asked for a raise. Hey, I had been comfortable, but 3 years without a raise seemed a bit much. The CFO grants my raise but tells me that I cannot edit my terms, that I have to punch in and out like everyone else. I explained the situation to him, but he's old and set in his ways and says that this is the way things are. I tell my boss, who is not happy about this, but we come up with a malicious compliance plan. I clock in like everyone else, a few minutes before the start and a few minutes after the end. These few minutes add up, and before you know it, I'm getting at least an hour extra per week. The CFO calls me and says, "Hey, you can't get overtime." I asked him on speaker with my boss in the room, who also said hello when I answered, if he wanted me to stand at the clock and wait for exact times to clock in and out. He said that would be acceptable, and my boss said, "Are you going to pay him for standing at the clock on company property?" The CFO was about to say no when I guess his brain jumped into gear and realized he was about to suggest something illegal. I explained that I sent the CFO an email explaining that this would happen, copied to my boss, and that he never responded. He was warned and still decided to stick to his guns. "Go ahead and edit your times," he says dejectedly. "Oh no sir, he will just keep doing what he's been doing. It balances out because he puts in so much extra work. It's only fair," says my boss. Now I get about an hour of overtime and I'm left alone by the CFO. So glad I'm not on salary. The third story is called Reported to the Boss. Fresh out of college and into the first post-college job. Now, some of us are very lucky and get to work in a field close to or in our chosen realm of expertise right out of college. I was not one of those lucky people, so I got to work for a popular rental car company for a while. You don't need to know which one, they are all similarly terrible. I was given the requisite training, not much, and left to the tender guardianship of someone who'd been there for a few years, i.e. work senior. At first I thought everything was fine. Why wouldn't it be fine? The girl and I seemed to get along well, and the job, while not fun or glamorous, paid me enough for the absolute bare minimum living expenses. Good thing I was still on the family insurance at the time, because the job, after an attempt or two, refused to hire me full-time so I could get my own insurance. Anyway, like I said, at first I thought things were fine. The person who was guiding me gradually started treating me poorly. I chalked it up to ongoing situations with her private life. She was pregnant, living situation stuff, etc. But as time went on, she kept snubbing me and some others and wouldn't answer questions. During my last attempt, she just told me, "Look, I don't wanna have to answer your questions anymore. Just report anything wrong you see to the boss. I'm sure you can all see where this is going." Found out from the boss that I was getting reported as not working, when I actually was. I luckily always had witnesses to the fact that I was, in fact, working as hard as I had to be, so nothing really came of it. As an aside, I later learned it had been her starting the rumors of my not being a good worker. Still don't know why, I was never anything but pleasant to her. In my relative naivety, I noticed that she was taking a lot more breaks than she was technically allowed, even considering she did have special dispensations because, you know, pregnant. More, she started disappearing from the job entirely at strange times, reappearing looking completely innocent and fresh, almost like she had not been working. Her partner would bring the car around, and she'd take the time to give it a loving wash, which was sometimes allowed. Thinking that this is strange, I did what she told me to do. I reported it to the boss. I named times and that I had seen her partner's car in the bay. Since I sometimes borrowed my roommate's car, I asked could I also use the bay to wash it. The boss looked confused but said I could wash the car if I wanted and we weren't busy. A few days passed and I noticed she's not in. I asked around and was like, where did she go? Did something happen with the baby? Is she okay? Turns out that and I later found out others reporting her and giving times made the boss decide to check the security cameras. She and her partner had, among other things, been stealing fuel and other things from the job, and she got canned on the relative spot. I don't think this story has a moral per se, but I'd say that you shouldn't disdain the source of good advice, even if the source was apparently trying to get you fired. The last story is called Move the Truck. I live in a mostly quiet neighborhood with lots of snowbirds and weekenders because of the proximity to a lake. The year-rounders are mostly retired and people generally get along fine. A couple of years ago, neighbors on one side built a new garage and driveway, moving their cars much closer to my existing forsythia hedge. I love the forsythia in the spring and basically let it grow however it likes so I can have the bright yellow flowers. Almost immediately they started complaining that the hedge blocked their view as they backed out of the driveway. In my state, neighbors have no right to a view extending over someone else's property. Our Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that as long as trees and bushes do not actually impinge onto the roadway, property owners have no obligation to trim for visibility. I keep a 5-foot strip moat between my hedge and the road, perfectly reasonable to my way of thinking. Since they have no recourse regarding hedges, they instead complain to county code enforcement about anything else they can think of. My brother parked his licensed and insured project truck on my property a while back because he was in the process of moving and needed a spot for it while he was figuring things out. In the meantime, he was in a bad accident in another vehicle and the truck has been sitting for over a year now. The license plate recently expired and I got a letter from the county with threats of fines if it wasn't removed. Cue the malicious compliance. My brother decided to sell the truck for scrap and hit a total rate this morning. This gave my neighbors the temporary victory as they observed from their deck, and nearly 6 inches of improved view from their driveway. At least until I moved my second vehicle, a 1960s Lincoln, which is about 2 feet longer than the truck with current plates and insurance, into that place this afternoon. As a single person with more than one vehicle, I may get around to drive that old car at least once more before winter. And now it's your time to shine. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories? I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.